All right, sweet. So thanks for introducing me to Shervin.
Yes.
Sweet interview.
You're
Or
welcome. Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Where are you right now? That's really cool.
So I'm currently at Pleasure Point Yoga, our movement space. So I don't own the studio, but I, teach here. And my kids are at a paddle out right now for Black Lives Matter. So it was really close. Instead of me having to go home to get good Wi-Fi, I just dropped over here.
Cool.
So,
Cool.
yeah,
And so,
yeah.
and you're in California, yeah?
Yeah, I'm in Santa Cruz, California.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So right at the beach. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. We were just
So
on the Oregon coast at the beach, which was really gorgeous.
yeah,
But
it's good to have like, especially right now with all that's happening, just like the contact with the water and, being in the ocean right now, all that salt is really like grounding,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
Well,
Yeah,
especially here,
yeah.
it's like freezing. So it's like
Yeah,
I love cold water. So it's like a nice little wake up.
yeah, that's
But
for
yeah, I
sure.
thought it would be cool to have you on the podcast and I mean talk about anything really, but I've been really impressed with all the stuff you've been initiating on in your group and for fellow yogis, I guess. You seem like
Yeah, yeah.
you've
Well,
been
yeah, whatever
up
you
to
feel
a
like chatting
lot.
about. Yeah. Well, I think it's funny. It's like, as our, you know, time evolves and we have to evolve. And as yogis, I mean, this is what we do, right? We adapt, we shift, we change. And, especially I feel like, ever since COVID-19, I mean, it kind of hit here pretty early on. It really was like another little like, okay, we've got to step up and meet the moment for me anyway. So I've been trying to be even more consistent, and I find my students are really appreciating that too. So, but we've been sheltering in place for a while, so it's
You've
I don't even know
noticed.
how
I
long.
noticed that too. Yep.
So it's I think it's challenging. I think we're all going through this time where it's like we're mourning a life that's like there's definitely a pivot that we've been in, like a turning point. Like the next couple of years aren't going to look like the last couple of years. Like
Yeah.
there's no way. And I think just so I have kids who are like high school age, and just looking at like what their next couple of years will look like, and how it's so gonna be so different than like what I envisioned and like what they envisioned. And I think everyone's going through this collective grieving of that, in addition to like the actual like virus stuff going on, and in
Right,
addition
right.
to like the social injustice going on, in addition to like all the things that have been
Yeah.
happening. Yeah. So
Well, and
um,
how interesting for that, that group of society, like the kids who thought that their future was going to look very similar to to like the kids who graduated before them or whatever, and just to have this idea that like things could shift just overnight, that things aren't as stable
yeah.
as. So I feel like in other countries that's probably more of a reality. Like your government could get
Hmm.
seized. The,
Yeah, yeah,
the but in the
yeah,
United
yeah,
States we're used to like a certain level of consistency, and so this is really
yeah,
throwing us for a loop. Yeah.
yeah. Like you're like in other countries, I have spent a lot of time in like, um, South America or Central America more, and Indonesia, and it's like one day you could wake up and your currency's not worth anything. Like there's
Right.
definitely like there's definitely a history. There's a history there, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm finding actually with like my kids, for example, they're so much more resilient than I ever like things that it's actually harder for me, I think, than it is for them, because they're more adaptive and resilient, than I don't think we give them credit for. But it's just definitely been a journey. It's definitely been a journey of like, how are things going to look, and like being open to, what's possible. And, I've been talking a lot about this idea of being squeezed through the eye of the needle, and how like we're all in the squeeze and like we have to leave. You can't take anything with you in that process, right? And we have to leave everything behind in a way. But then we have this beautiful opportunity to pick up on the other side of that pressure cooker that we're in. Like we get to choose what we're picking up to carry forward into the future. Like we get to actually have this, we get to choose what kind of world we're going to live in, so there's a beauty in that.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
That's interesting that you say that. The end of the coaching program that I do, that's basically like the takeaway, not to give it away. You have to go through it anyway, but like you can't simultaneously want something different than what you're living and also take everything that you are in order to be there. So you have to let go of the possibility, or you have to be willing to accept the possibility that everything that you know now is going to change. But don't worry, because where you're going is way better.
Yeah. And we get to choose what that's going to, we get to choose like the parts of our life that we want to carry forward, and the things that didn't work out. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been hearing from so many people like, what are like some parts of their life, there's such a big relief. Like where I live next to Silicon Valley, and Google and Facebook and all the places, and Apple, and a lot of people are like, I'm done spending 3 hours a day in a car commuting. Like there's so many like pieces of that have really kind of, it's been like a break in that like structure. And so now they're like, okay, how can we rebuild this on the other side? So it's actually a life that I want to live.
That's neat. That's kind of the area that I'm in is similar to that. It's like the Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon type area. That's that's really interesting too, that all these, I mean, these corporations are having their employees now work from home. And so I know from talking to my partner, it's like, well, could we do this for forever? Do we really need to come in?
Yeah. And there's obviously there's a beauty to like being in person with people and stuff, but it's like, so much of the work, I don't know, I feel like we're in this big revolution of education, like colleges, and, there is a beauty of sitting in a lecture and like taking notes, and like being in that, if college is a path for you. I mean, it was the path for me. So much that time, and so I think there's a lot of like that coming to light as well in terms of like the educational realms.
So your kids are,
and like as a yoga teacher, I was just gonna say, as a yoga teacher, like the yoga teacher trainings, I don't know if you've ever been through those, but with the Yoga Alliance, like they required so many contact hours, and so now it's like they're allowing us to run everything at a distance. And of course there is a lot of hands-on work in yoga,
right?
But at the same time, like, can we do the history of yoga in a slideshow instead of so there's a lot of that coming to light, I think, in so many different realms.
Yeah. Your children are about to graduate, you said?
I have my daughter will be a junior, my son will be a freshman.
Okay.
So they're not quite there yet. Not ready for that.
And so the education thing is interesting to me, because so I had been homeschooling for my kids' whole lives. I mean, my oldest is 7, so it wasn't a huge chunk, but still. And I had just decided, because I moved up here and we didn't really know anybody, I was like, I think it'd be a good idea for them to go to school. Also, I was newly a single mom, so I needed a little bit more time to do my stuff, I thought. So I put them into school. They're in school for 6 weeks, and then they're out of school. And I realized it was so interesting that, first of all, like I had to do my work and be at home with them, which I thought previously I couldn't do, but suddenly there was like a lot of slack because everybody's having to do this. So nobody's expecting that I'm going to have an uninterrupted session with them now because everyone's kids are at home.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I thought that was interesting, but also just like, I think everybody's handling it a little bit differently. But for me, in my mind, I'm like, none of the kids are going to be in September as if they had been in school for this period. You know, it's going to be varying levels of having kept up with the curriculum and whatever. So I think that'll be interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And they're already talking about, yeah, you know, and you look at, okay, how much of our curriculum really was meaningful and like how much like was, you know, how much of it was just like, how much of it could we condense without so much just extra information that really wasn't, you know, taking them down that pathway of whatever it is, you know. I mean, I, you know, you look at some of these, you know, things that my kids have to do. I'm like, really? It's just like busy work, you know.
Yeah,
And they're
yeah.
now outgrowing. They're outgrowing that now. Now it's much more like, you know, in those accelerated classes, it gets a little accelerated in that way, and they don't have a lot of room for a lot of other stuff when you get a little older. But it's one of those things where I think we're all being softer with ourselves, which is really beautiful. And then also just noticing like, oh, even like in our work, like as an entrepreneur, like how much of this was work and like how much of it actually supported my clients or my students or actually moved the needle in my work in some way, you know. Like how much of it is just me wasting time. So that's been really beautiful too to see.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Are
yeah,
so you have this or you used to when we were allowed to congregate, have
yeah,
like a live class that you did weekly at this studio? Or were you
yeah.
always there?
So I taught 3 to 5 classes a week, like yoga. So
Okay.
I teach bhakti vinyasa. So there's chanting and like in vinyasa flow yoga.
Hmm.
And then we also have a monthly kirtan. So that was like third Mondays of the month we would have here. And then I also led teacher trainings here and you know, workshops and stuff like that. So this is like my home studio. So this
Hmm.
is like the main place where I would offer experiences, you know, live with people. And I can't wait to be live with people again.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't know much about your yoga background. Well, do you want to tell us about that? Like how you got involved with that particular branch and what your evolution was?
Yeah, so I started out in yoga. Well, I mean, so if you go back to like the day, like my first exposure to yoga was probably like when my mom had a record with like, I wanted to say it was like Lillian Folan or whatever her name is, but you know, this is like the 80s, you know, leotard, like it was very kind of Jane Fonda kind of like vibes, you know, and this is LA in the 80s. And I thought it was kind of weird. And then in college, I mean, you know, I was very young, and in college, I started meditating. So I got into Zen meditation in college. And previous to that, I've always been a new age bookstore kind of girl. Like even in junior high and high school, like I spent a lot of my time in high school at the Bodhi Tree bookstore in LA, which is now closed.
Me too.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love that place. Or
yeah,
loved.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was like
Oh,
a refuge for me, and I would just like devour anything about mindfulness and like meditation and spirituality. And so that was sort of my ground being. I get into college and I ended up finding we had a Zen teacher that lived close to my college who was training to be a Roshi. So I got to sit with him, and then it was during that time I was exposed to Iyengar yoga in the Lie Down Yoga book, like because there was no studios. And um, I taking an Iyengar class at the get from LA, right? And so that's why I started yoga. It was because Iyengar was the only thing that there was. And so after college, I come back. I actually lived in Seattle for a year, practiced Iyengar there because that's all there was at this like gym.
Huh.
And then I moved, and then I moved back to California at the end of the late 90s, like 97, 98. And vinyasa was kind of becoming a thing. Brian Kest.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go to LA, I try to take Brian Kest classes, and then he came out with VHS tapes, and so I'd play those when I would come back here to Santa Cruz. And so I started getting into power vinyasa then. So that's kind of my beginning, my origin story in yoga. And then I went to acupuncture school. I almost did a teacher training during that, but it was too much. Yes, I'm an acupuncturist as well. And then I had a couple kids. And then I kind of started teaching yoga and practicing acupuncture. And then the teaching yoga took over the practicing acupuncture. So I actually kind of taught more like a vinyasa, just power vinyasa kind of style, I would say, until I really got in. I was exposed to, kirtan music for the first time. I think it was a Baron. So this is like really funny, but Baron Baptiste, the yoga teacher. So he had a Baron Baptiste live DVD that had Krishna Das playing, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And when I was pregnant with my daughter, my yoga teacher here in town would have us listen to the Gayatri mantra and all these mantras, mantra music. And I didn't really know what it was. I was like, this is really cool, But it wasn't, I didn't put the two together, like yoga and kirtan or yoga and mantra music or anything like that until probably until I really met Janet Stone, who's like kind of one of my main teachers. And so I went to her class, like, I don't know, years ago. It was the 10th anniversary party at Yoga Tree for her, and in San Francisco. And we chanted and did yoga at the same time in the same class. And I was like, what is this? It totally blew my mind.
Yeah.
And it connected. Like, I always thought that, I think a lot of people might go through this with music, but I always thought that like to chant, you had to be a quote unquote musician. Like you had to be a Krishna Das, like I didn't know that there was this practice that like
That's a
everybody
funny
did.
statement though, because he's not a musician. I mean, he wasn't.
I know. But this is like from my not exposed to any of this kind of brain, right? I always thought of like you had to be like a recording artist or like a musician, like a trained musician in some way. And I assumed he was because he was on an album. And and so that was sort of how I kind of started putting the two together. I didn't really start chanting. I did her a train, like my 300, 500 hour with her. And I bought a harmonium. I didn't play it for 3 years.
Okay.
And then one day I was just like, I learned how to play one song, and then it's like, it was all over after that. I did have a little bit of musical training in musical theater growing up, but that's what I love about kirtan. It's like, it's for everybody, so that's sort of how I put the two together. And I think with mantra music, what really hooked me was that it connected the mind and the heart, right? So I've always been sort of living from the throat up, very much like let me get a PhD, let me get a math, like let me get another degree, like very much in the mind, right? And I loved yoga philosophy, but there was this disconnect from like the embodiment of my practice, right? And it was chanting that really connected me, I think integrated the practice for me in such a really beautiful way.
Yeah. I've noticed that I think there's just something so beautiful about moving the body externally, like through external space. But then when you're chanting, you're moving internally. I mean, you're moving internally anyway when you're moving your body, but like there's just another layer. It's like from the inside out. I don't know it goes deeper from the inside out, maybe. But the combination is
the vibration.
Really cool. Yeah. Yeah. I remember taking this ecstatic dance class once, and we had moved the whole time. And then we started singing along to this track. And I was like, wow, that is integrated. Like that feels like it's using everything of me,
Yeah. Yeah. And that vibration, like what, like, I mean, there's a whole science, like in Hatha yoga, it's like the power of sound and mantra vibrating into your cells, like it changes you on this like deep level, like, and you feel it in your bones, it's like, in Chinese medicine school, they started coming out with these tuning forks. I think they were called acutonics then. I don't know what they call them now, but they're these tuning forks at different frequencies, and you'd place them on acupuncture points that were more like a near bony process, like a shin bone or something, and you'd feel the vibration of that sound current like in your bone, and that's what we're doing when we're chanting. It's like you're vibrating yourself, it's so cool. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you just kind of learn how to chant and then you started
My
teaching it in your
path.
classes, or?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, honestly, I had some mantras I learned with Janet, and then I dove into YouTube and learned a couple of songs. And then started, playing, in before class and after class with, using mantra as like a theme, like whatever the theme was, weaving that mantra in with the theme of the class. And then I just started, someone asked me to lead a kirtan somewhere, and I was like, why don't we have one at our studio? And there's one in town, but at that point there was like one in town. It was like always very particular style of like mantra music, and I was exposed more to like Bhakti Fest, in places where there's just from all different kinds of lineages mantra.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started a kirtan here, and so I'll teach, I teach a lot of mantra, say in my teacher trainings, and we chant in the beginning and after, beginning and end of class. And I've taught little ditty harmonium. I mean, really super basic harmonium little workshops, but I mean, I'm totally self-taught. Like I taught myself like chords on a harmonium from YouTube, like, and then how to like, move chords, or what they call, like shift one key in a chord so that you can like have better transitions, and like, so it's just totally self-taught. But I did grow up dancing, which I think helped in terms of beat. So I hear, I was a ballet and jazz tap dancer until I was in college. And so I hear a drum in the back of my mind always. So it's like very much the beat, like, because the beat is very driven into you in dance. So, so that helped, I think, a little bit to feel comfortable, like, in some ways. Yeah. That's been the journey.
That's cool. Do
Yeah,
your kids involve themselves at all in what you do? Are they into it?
When they're younger, they were. Now it's like, I think they're starting to come back around a little bit. Like my daughter's come to before we had to close, like, live kirtans with a shelter in place. She was helping me to sign in. So that was really cool. But they're not, like, I think it's a little bit like, whatever I do isn't always like coolest thing. So I'm kind of waiting for them to come back around to what they want to come back around to. It's like you kind of expose them and like make the offering, and then we'll see. But like they have friends that come to my yoga classes, but they won't come to my yoga classes. So that's kind of funny. Yeah.
Well,
so.
If I ever wanted to make my youngest son cry, all I'd have to do is start singing. Especially playing piano. I know it's so weird. I think
That's
both
so
of them
funny
have associated
to me.
like music is what takes my mama away from me. So I don't like it when she does that. They don't mind music in general, but just when I'm making it, it's very upsetting. So
yeah. Well, I've heard about that with like friends who are yoga teachers. They're like, they don't want their kids to associate yoga with work. Like when mom talks about yoga, she's going to go away for work, Right. So, they definitely will like, like meander around it in some way to like so like charge it with this kind of idea, but I feel you. Yeah. So sweet.
Yeah, yeah, it's cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what else have you been up to in this interesting
So
time?
lately, yeah, it's been a lot of, trying to create a space for people to spend time in. Um, so how can we be together when we're not together? It's really been a lot of what I've been trying to put together, because I'm used to leading a couple retreats a year, or we had this one training we have to postpone, and so I'm creating something called the LIVEAWAKE Collective, which is an online virtual community where, each month people get like a breathwork practice, meditation, and we have like online, new moon or full moon, um, ceremonies, and just like a place to do some of the transformative work that we usually are doing live together in a studio setting. But virtually. So I'm pretty excited about that. That's going to be launching pretty soon. So that's what I've been working on lately, to creating
Yeah.
that space for like the coaching pieces that, like, not everybody can really be in a coaching program with me. And my next one probably won't run for a while. And so it's like, how can I give people some of those tools in a way that they can integrate in their life that's feels very like connected and community driven. So that's sort of the vision behind that.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
It seems like just such a great idea in general to have an online offering, because even when everything opens up, then you can be in a community with people in Egypt and New York, and
Hmm.
it's it's a really, I think it's
Yeah.
a really cool expansion of offerings anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have the Rock Your Purpose podcast. We have a lot of people from around the world who are in my Rock Your Purpose Facebook group. And then we also have I've done a lot of teacher trainings in like Bali and Costa Rica. And so there's people who are all over the place. And so it's like, how can we all gather together? I have, students in Dallas and Boston, and like, how can we all be together and not have to be on a retreat in Baja, just
Mhm.
to be together. Like it keeps us connected, and it keeps people kind of feeling supported, like especially now more than ever. Yoga and mindfulness and breath work and mantra and all these tools are like essential, I feel like, for being able to show up in the world in the way that we want to show up with resiliency,
Mhm.
and like with compassion and like empathy and all these things, for our own experiences as well.
Mhm.
And so that was really the drive also behind it. It was like, now I just want to get the work out to people. I just want to get it out, so people have the tools that they need without having to sign up for like a big course or a program or
Mhm.
whatever. So that's been really kind of the vision. And then after we all can be together live, it kind of keeps us in the bubble together. Um, so that when we meet up again live, it's like, oh, we're like, we're checking back in, and it becomes family.
Mhm.
Um, so that's sort of the impetus behind it, is like, how can I get some of these out, and like, I don't know about you, but I feel like all my work has been so scattered all over the place. Like, uh, and it's kind of, it feels like more like having a hub feels really good in terms of
Mhm.
like, okay, this is going to be the hub for all the things. And then, people will get special access to, other offerings that I do and whatever, but I'm excited. It's like a new era.
That
Yeah.
sounds very organized to me. Does it
Yeah.
you sound like you have like
Yeah.
you have a good sense of structure. Is that the case?
Yeah, that's my I have so if you're into astrology, my Venus is in Capricorn. So
Okay.
I love like graphic design, like beautiful, organized visuals. And I sort of think that way. Like I think in terms of like visual orientation meditation, like how things would be arranged and connected. Does that make sense? So yeah, so if in my mind, if things are organized like that in my mind, like then I can like exhale. You know.
I love it. So that's called the Live Away Collective.
Yeah, live awake, like living
Live
awake.
Oh, I thought away, like
Yeah.
because we're all away from each other. Okay.
No, live awake. Yeah, like
Live
living
awake.
awake and in your purpose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of the work I teach about is Dharma and like purpose and like finding your purpose and waking up to purpose, and also just like waking up in general, you know, to getting off automatic pilot and, you know, really stepping into our power, our prana, as people. And I mean, it's fun along the way too, but yeah, live awake.
Live Awake.
So liveawakecollective.com is where that will be found. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll share that.
It's pretty exciting. Yeah.
What is your understanding of Dharma and purpose?
Well, I mean, that's a big question. Well, for me, Dharma and purpose, it's like there's these two kinds of Dharma, right? There's this kind of universal Dharma, universal truth, universal this kind of purpose that's beyond our own individual self. And then we all have our own individual purpose or Dharma. I think that's always unfolding. And it changes and it shifts. And what's interesting to me is like, I know you shifted your name, right? And part of that shift is, you know, I feel like we change as people and our Dharma changes. And like the changing of a name is like, it's like, okay, the shift or the step up into a new Dharma, you know, it's like almost like this up leveling into another Dharma. And so I feel like as we grow and we age, our Dharma shifts and it becomes more and more inclusive to those other, you know, stages of our life or dharmas that we were living, you know. And so I think there is this dance between like destiny and free will, you know, like I think we all have purpose on this planet and we get to choose how it unfolds, and we get to choose how it gets expressed, and we get to choose to ignore it as well, you know. But there's this beautiful, I think as people wake up to their own lives and their own inner life, like Dharma naturally starts to reveal itself, you know. So it's one of my favorite topics to talk about.
Yeah, so that is super interesting to me because I have only ever heard Dharma used to
and I think we're all
describe...
here, you know.
Oh, go ahead.
Purpose.
No, sorry, finish what you were saying. I think we have a little bit of
go
latency.
Oh yeah, no, go for it. No, I want to hear what you're saying.
Well, no, I was saying, so I have in my, you know, spiritual practice, which is becoming clearer and clearer to me, was a little bit of an authoritarian regime. I have really only ever heard the word Dharma used to describe like a set of measures to apply in my life that would keep me on track, you know, so like basically rules. So it sounds like that's kind of a different, and I've heard that in other traditions too.
Different
like,
meaning. Yeah. Well, there's, and like in Buddhism, there's the Buddha Dharma, right? So it's the teachings of the Buddha, like, but they're universal principles that are, you know, like the Four Noble Truths, you know, they're not rules to live by. They're more like revelations about the nature of reality. But Dharma does have, I think, a few meanings. You know, there's the meaning of, you know, like universal truths or universal laws or the teachings, so to speak. And then there's also this idea that's more from a yogic context. My guess, like the Bhagavad Gita and the story of Arjuna and Krishna, and he talks to Arjuna about doing his Dharma, you know. And so that's like another layer of meaning. You know, Krishna represents like consciousness itself, and you know, Arjuna's in that, you know, in that kind of between the rock and the hard place, like what do I do here, for those of you who don't know this story. But he's telling Arjuna that it's better to fail at doing your Dharma than it is to succeed at somebody else's, in that it's better to, you know, not be as quote unquote successful at your own Dharma, but it's uniquely yours than it is to try to be somebody that you're not, I guess, is really what that saying is. It's like, be the authentic you, you know. So there are a lot of layers to the meaning of Dharma. You know, I'm sure I'm missing many, but I've always kind of played with those two ideas. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually wasn't familiar with that story, so thank you.
Oh yeah, that's like one of my favorite parts of the Gita. You know, it's like, because I think, I don't know, a lot of us grow up like, I mean, trying to be somebody else, you know. And I grew up in, so just to, you know, I grew up in a celebrity culture in LA. You know, friends who are celebrities, and it was very much like everybody tried something else, you know. And so I through that as I kind of removed myself from that culture, where it's like, oh, like, what about just being who we are, you know? Can you hear me okay? Oh, okay.
I can hear you fine. I just have a goldfish that's joined me here.
Hi.
Who's hungry.
Oh, I feel you. Oh, goldfish.
Which is why I left him lots of food, but
Yeah. Hi.
I was watching an interview with Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, of all things, but they were doing it like on Zoom or whatever. They were saying they had about 20 minutes because they'd given their kids some pretzels and an iPad.
Yeah. You're like, you know the time. Yeah. Totally know. Yeah, I know. I've got a puppy at home, so it's like a lot of puppy stuff now for me too. It's like, okay, he's got a toy. How long do I have?
Do you have the stuff?
Oh,
yeah.
So cute. Yeah.
But yeah, I know what you're saying about the celebrity culture and wanting to be something else. It's interesting because I think from like a superficial perspective, we sort of think like these people who are in the public eye and they're making tons of money and whatever, just automatically we think, oh, they're living like their biggest and best lives. Like this is like such a full life. And this is so random, but in learning about Scientology, I'm gonna go back. In learning about this, it's not so many of them, but I'm just seeing like the different ways that people can actually feel enslaved. And we think they're living these amazing lives. You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that was one thing. So when I was in acupuncture school, I was back in LA and I worked for this acupuncturist as an intern who was like a celebrity acupuncturist, you know, and so we had like really big name people coming in there. It was like a private clinic, you know, the whole thing. And just talking to people, it's just like, first of all, like a lot of them do feel trapped by their life, you know, because you can't go anywhere like without, you know, there's like, is the money worth it, you know? For a lot of people, and they get kind of trapped into a cycle or contracts, or I mean, there are pieces to that whole life that's not worth it, you know, to me anyway. And yeah, just people having lives, you know, they're just going through the same things, you know. And that was a really big turning point for me too, is being like making that choice to not stay in that kind of world of like of all those things, you know. It's like, it's good to get out of LA for sure.
Is that
I like to go back for 2 days and then leave.
Is that why you moved up north?
I actually moved up here for med school. I was going to go to medical school. Yeah. So I was actually interning and, you know, preparing for med school. I ended up going instead into Chinese medicine. After interviewing at med schools, I was like, I don't like any of the people I'm meeting, you know, but, and I was really interested in alternative medicine a little bit then, like Andrew Weil was kind of coming out, you know, and so that kind of was sparking my interest. But I think I always have this kind of I love to explore new places and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say that was originally why I left by any means, but when I go back now, I can kind of see, a lot of my friends still live there, you know, I can kind of see that kind of contrast of, that, we don't have TV. I don't have a TV or anything like that, so I'm not really in the land of any of that anymore. So it's always kind of fun to go back and just like see what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. My sister's always like naming some name, so and so did this, and she knows now. She's like, oh, okay, so he was in this movie.
Yeah, you're like, I don't know.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. I actually really like LA, like that area. I mean, I was born there, so I have,
Okay, you were too.
I don't
Okay,
know,
yeah.
I have
Yeah.
an affinity for that area, but I was done with living there. For me, it had to do with the competition for resources, like the standing in line for everything, because it's just so populated,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I grew up on the West Side. I still like the whole like Venice, Santa Monica, like that whole strip, like that whole, I kind of grew up in that whole Brentwood, that whole area, and so it's always home, and I definitely I get nostalgic for it, and I love going back and like going for a run at the beach and like, all those kinds of things. It's good to see the hills, and but I can't live in that kind of yeah, it's like sardines, anymore. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I feel you. Yeah, and it's always good to have I mean, I'm lucky I get to go to my home, where I grew up, and I've got friends who had to leave their country of origin and can't go back, so it's nice to be able to go back and just kind of feel that kind of knowingness of like where everything is. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So
Well,
when did you leave LA? Sorry.
let's see. I left in, must have been 2011.
Okay. Yeah. So after I did. Yeah.
That's when I got
Oh,
married and moved to Phoenix.
gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And now
So you're
I'm
there
in,
for more of the bigger yoga stuff going on, and
yeah.
um,
Well, when I was living in, so
yeah.
I only lived in LA on my own, like as an adult for a few years,
Hmm.
because we had moved since I was born there. Um,
Gotcha.
but yeah, then I moved to Phoenix and got married and had kids and all that, and now
Yeah.
I'm in Washington. So it was funny that you had lived in Seattle, because I'm right near Seattle now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I lived in Queen Anne for a bit. Yeah.
Oh, sweet. That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
We live in
Cool.
Redmond, so we're
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
like, it's funny. It's a type of suburbia that I've never really experienced, because it's so nature oriented. It's like
Yeah.
so many trails, and it's awesome.
It's beautiful up there. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's how we are here. I mean, Santa Cruz is kind of that kind of, we have, trails everywhere and redwoods, and you can be the redwoods or you can be the water. So you've got the mountains and you got the kind of play of the two, which is really, I think, very healing, so you can find what you need at any time. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Shervin about that, because we were saying how amazing it is in this period where we can't go much of anywhere, to be in a place that has nature in it. I mean, is amazing, because if you're stuck and all there is buildings, that's a really different experience. Like,
Hmm. Yeah, we've been having a lot of, like, I have a couple students right now who are in Chicago and who are Zooming, doing some teaching Zoom classes right now. So yoga classes online on Zoom through Pleasure Point Yoga. And a couple of my students are in Chicago, and it's like a big deal for them to like be able to go out, and be, because the part, what's open and what can they access in terms of nature, higher ed, the shelter. And so, yeah, I really appreciate where I am, and wish I could just send it to everybody, you know? Yeah.
yeah,
So, I should goldfish. Yeah.
yeah, it's funny. It's all, I mean, I feel like if you're in a city, you always have the idea that you can go somewhere, like, oh, we can drive to the beach, or we can drive to the, and you might not even actually do it all that much, but you have the idea that you can, and then, something like
Hmm.
this happens and that may feel more confining.
That's true. That's true. I mean, how many times have I lived somewhere urban and like been like, yeah, just knowing you have the freedom to do it is really what it's about. It's like you can just pick up and take off and go wherever, but like not being able to do that, it's like, yeah, it's definitely probably the challenge.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
thank you so much for joining me today and telling us about
yeah.
your
Thanks for chatting.
yoga journey.
Yeah.
How can we find you? There's many places. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, emilyperry.com is probably the best place. You can find me there. The Live Awake Collective, the wait list is open right now for that. LiveAwakeCollective.com is a great place to go. And it might, by the time this goes live, the enrollment might be open already. So there's a good program a lot, and my handle is emilyperry.co. So that's usually a good place to find me. I'm in there in stories all day long usually. So yeah, it's a good way to get connected. For sure. Thanks for having
Cool.
me here.
Yeah, and I highly recommend that everybody join your Rock Your Purpose group. That's awesome on Facebook.
Oh
Cool.
yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. It was
Yeah,
so fun to talk to you.
yeah, great to talk to you too, and great to see your goldfish.
Yes. Awesome. Bye.
Yeah. Bye. Talk to you soon.